Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. It is September 12th, 2017, and I'm broadcasting to you live from my apartment in New Jersey, also known as Tatiana Studios. Really happy that I have my co-host joining me today, Josh Shigala from Voltoro. Josh, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Nice to see you too. Great news.
That's what I was going to ask you about. I want the news. Tell us the news.
You want the hot goss? Yeah, we closed our seed round. We got a 7-figure seed round closed. Done deal. Cash in the bank. We're going to scale. Oh, it's just so good. It's actually really nice to start building something instead of, talking to VCs, which is really annoying. And we didn't do the ICO way. We actually, went old school VC.
Yeah.
I love ICOs, but I still think there's some room to grow and mature in that space.
Well, congrats.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. And by the way, here is one of my favorite people in crypto, Erik Voorhees, on the show, on the Tatiana show today. How are you, Erik?
I'm very good, very good. And I totally sympathize with the relief that you feel after closing a round. It's a great feeling. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. It is a really good feeling. And I actually feel, you wear a million hats as a CEO and a million hats as a startup in general, whoever you've got as co-founders, and the relief to be able to start taking some of those hats off and giving them to other people.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And I just really look forward to all our users have been asking for so many cool features. Haven't had time or bandwidth to really do them, and now we can actually. And that's
now you
really
can build.
Super excited about that.
Awesome.
Very cool. Well, Erik, you have a lot of big announcements coming out. I don't even know where to start. I think one of the neat things about doing this episode so close to the Aspen event is that we can talk about where we're going to see each other next. And Nexus has putting on a conference at the Aspen Institute. And I've never been there. I heard it's, very fancy. And I think that Aspen in general, I have actually skied there before, is an amazing place to visit out in Colorado. And you're also going to be participating. So tell me, I guess ShapeShift is going to have a presence at the conference. What's the crew doing for this?
ShapeShift itself won't. Some shapeshifters will be there, myself included. And,
okay.
Yeah, it looks like it has a pretty cool guest list, including the one and only Ron Paul, who I have met once before in a prior life, but I'm very excited to meet again.
Yeah, well, I think that between Ron Paul and Judge Napolitano and Jesse Ventura and Doug Casey is going to be there, and just so many neat people coming together. It started out as a conference that was supposedly just crypto based, but now they've sort of expanded the scope, and they're doing a big focus on the music. So I think that that's going to be really neat. And I don't know, I'm looking forward to, giving a talk and stuff, but also performing with some new people too.
Yeah, it'll be great. It's only like a week and a half away, right? Or a week away?
Yeah, it's next week. So I'm going to be flying into Aspen on Wednesday and staying there until Sunday. I know Lynn Ulbricht's going to meet me over there. We're doing a panel together. Rob from Zencash is going to be there. Ari from Storm Token, George Howard, who I work with, who's working with me on the Token FM project. So I don't know, a lot of good people. I mean, there's a lot of more famous people too, but I have my inner crew, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So jelly.
Yeah, I was trying to get Josh to come out, but he wasn't feeling it.
It's a bit of a flight.
Yeah, just a bit. It's
I just didn't know when
from New York.
Didn't know when the round was going to close, and I mean, we kind of had a clue, but just wanted to make sure that it was close.
As you should.
Yeah.
Right. So Erik, tell me a little bit about. I think that there's a bunch of different announcements that you guys had, and you and Josh were talking about Prism in advance. And I don't know what Prism is, and some of my audience may not know what Prism is. So can you give me a quick overview? And actually before that, for people who are completely clueless, what is ShapeShift and a little bit of trajectory there?
Yeah, so ShapeShift is a digital asset exchange. So it's basically a way to convert one digital asset into another. We are unique from other exchanges in that we don't have any user accounts at all. Like you don't even sign up with us. We don't take your email. You don't log into anything. You just use it like a vending machine. We also don't have any fiat currency involved, no government money. And yeah, it's been around for 3.5 years. It's grown like crazy. We have about 45 people now, full time.
What?
Yeah, and trying to get to
Wow.
about 60 by the end of the year. A year ago, we were 8 people, so that'll give you some sense of things. And yeah, we have so ShapeShift is a Swiss company, and ShapeShift.io is our primary product, but we have a number of other things that we build in-house, and one which is a market data site, CoinCap.io, and then Prism, which we have had in a private beta since consensus in May of this year. And so that's what you're referring to. And Prism is basically a portfolio platform for cryptos. So if you want to buy a portfolio of, let's say, 20% Litecoin and 5% Dash and 15% Bitcoin, you can do that with Prism. You make your portfolio and then you fund it with Ether as collateral. So the only thing you need to use is Ether, and Prism creates the portfolio for you. And what's cool about it is that it is trustless, meaning ShapeShift does not have control of your funds. You do not have to leave your money deposited with anyone that can run away or steal it. And so it's a much faster and easier and safer way of getting exposure to these assets without leaving funds at an exchange or without downloading a bunch of wallets yourself. So that's the basic concept. URL for that is prism.exchange, and it's still in private beta, but you can sign up for the waitlist.
You know, I like this. I think this is something that I understand what it is, and it sounds like it has a lot of utility. I've been playing around and buying a lot of different other coins lately and trying to get in and out of exchanges and figuring out which wallet's going to hold everything. Let's say I want to invest a Bitcoin's worth of money and I want to put it out in the Prism. Do I send, like, what does Bitcoin say, like $4,400 or something? Do I send $4,400 worth of Ether in, or do I send Ether as like the smart contract execution mechanism, but then still send in Bitcoin as the pot?
Yeah, so it's based in Ether, so you would not send in Bitcoin.
Okay.
But if you wanted $4,400 worth of Ether, then yeah, you tell the interface that you want to create a Prism with that's worth $4,400, and you want to allocate it in whatever way you wish, and then it gives you an Ethereum address. You send $4,400 worth of Ethereum to that address, and then your Prism is created, and it lives there as a smart contract on the Ethereum blockchain, tracking the value of your portfolio until you decide to close it, in which case you get more or less Ethereum back based on the performance of the assets.
Sounds a little bit scary, but it sounds good. I like it. I think that sounds really, like, I think it sounds
weird.
It's intimidating,
Weird,
I think, to be putting your money anywhere, right? And because the nice thing about having it on an exchange is that you can just hit sell. Can you do that with Prism? Can you say, okay, I want to sell off some of my Zcash or something or whatever, my Litecoin, and only sell off that portion? How does that work? Or is it all a big bundle?
It's a big bundle, but you can rebalance it. So if you're like, screw that Litecoin, I want to get rid of that, you can change the allocation whenever you want. But yeah, there's literally a sell button, and then you send like a blank transaction of ETH into the contract, which then cashes you out. So yeah, very easy. And if you have like a portfolio of 10 coins, it's far easier than if you are trying to buy all those on an exchange, because you don't have to put up like bid orders and wait for them to fill, or any of that stuff. It's significantly easier, and you're not having to trust a central party with your funds.
Josh is so excited. He can't even sit in his chair. He's like, this is the greatest.
No, I've been private beatering away on this thing, and it's just beautiful, because the big problem is really a lot of these smaller coins. I don't know who they are. I don't know who the dev team are. And to be honest, a lot of the smaller coins, no one's even checking that code. They're just a little bit too small, in terms of what these wallets that are giving me. I don't know. Maybe some people are checking them, but I don't know who they are. With Bitcoin and some of the larger currencies, I know a hell of a lot of eyeballs are looking at that code for some of these wallets and checking it. So I don't want to download a new wallet for every little coin that I'm think is cool.
It's dangerous.
it's super dangerous, you know, and so I would much rather have a beautiful smart contract. I have one private key, one Ethereum private key, and I can just rebalance my portfolio, and I've got one key to deal with. And that's excellent using the Exodus wallet. And I know that that's been looked over plenty of times for plenty of eyeballs. So it's it's really great, Erik. Love it.
I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, I'm gonna check it out in Aspen. Maybe I can take one of your one of the shapeshifters and kind of like walk through it, and then I don't know, maybe 5 questions, then that will help guide you guys and say, oh, okay, this is where people don't understand.
Yeah.
But it sounds pretty straightforward, a little bit intimidating still, but I like it. I think this is something that that anybody who wants to get into cryptos can do, right? I don't know. I feel like I'm giving you a sales pitch, but I'm excited. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's fun.
I also like your new announcement about KeepKey, one of my favorite wallets, an old Crypto Media Hub client, and also really nice, wonderful people. So what's the story there? How's that working?
So ShapeShift acquired KeepKey probably about 6 weeks ago, and we did the announcement maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. And so basically, KeepKey is one of the 3 hardware wallet companies in the world, and all 3 of these companies are great. You have KeepKey, Ledger, and Trezor. They all make great products. I've used them all. I have all of them. And we had the opportunity to acquire KeepKey, and basically that allows us to have a really smooth integration so that people can hold their assets on the KeepKey device. So again, holding it not with a central party, which is kind of key to this stuff. Holding it on their hardware device, which is much safer, and converting between Bitcoin or ETH or Dash or whatever on the device itself without ever having to visit a website or without ever having to trust someone else with their keys. So that's the basic idea. And KeepKey will live on as its current brand and product. We're not changing the brand or anything, but it is now owned and operated by ShapeShift.
So are they on the market yet? Because for a while people couldn't get them.
Oh yeah.
And my old KeepKey is still okay, right?
For sure, yeah. All the old KeepKeys are fine. They will still update with firmware, when they're supposed to. And yeah, they're in stock. You can buy them from KeepKey.com or from Amazon.
How much are they right now?
They are, I believe, $99. The price, I believe, is going up to $129. So if you want to get one now.
Get your KeepKeys, everybody. Hotcakes,
yeah.
like hotcakes.
Yeah.
They're going.
They have been selling like hotcakes. I think basically, and this has been true of all the hardware wallet companies, but basically, they just have such a great overlap of ease of use and security that for most people, whether they're holding $500 worth or $5 million worth, a properly done hardware wallet setup is a really good solution for them. So as crypto grows, so grow the hardware wallets.
I like it. Very good.
Man, you are one busy son of a gun.
I have good people around me. That's kind of what business is all about, right? Like finding good people to work with on various projects and making things happen. I certainly couldn't do all this myself, so I rely on a lot of people, and they do really good work.
What I really love about you, Erik, what I really love about you, Erik, is that you always choose projects that are truly decentralized, without any trust, and really sticking to the ethos of crypto, with Satoshi Dice being one of the first back in the day.
Yeah, the OG Dice.
And back then, people were starting to bitch and moan about dust from Satoshi Dice, and how the blocks are going to deal with it, and we've all seen the how that stemmed out. But really amazing projects. And then of course ShapeShift came out, where again you didn't need a central authority. You're dealing with the network, and with you're not having to deal like put across KYC and all of this sort of nonsense to exchange between different digital assets. And it's just such an integral part now of the crypto sphere. Really, most wallets that you go to, if you're moving across, that was really an important invention that you built.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think ShapeShift is something like 2 or 3% of all the Bitcoin transactions today.
Wow.
So So yeah, it's you know, as the industry has blossomed in different directions, the ability to instantly move between them, I felt like was going to be integral to the entire industry. Good for Bitcoin, good for Ethereum, good for every token. Just having that immediate liquidity at anyone's fingertips anywhere, except for New York.
Yeah,
it was important. Speaking of New York, we actually blocked Washington as well. So
Really?
Washington,
Why? What happened there?
Same thing. The stupid politicians decide they want to put in regulations that actually endanger people, and they basically want to treat crypto companies like banks, and that means requiring them to essentially extract all sorts of personal information from customers who don't need to provide it for the service that they're trying to use. And when you pull a bunch of private information from people, you become a target for hackers. And I don't know how many examples of this we need. Like Equifax just got hacked a few days ago, and like millions of people's records are now being held hostage by hackers and will probably be released on the dark webs and sold. And it's just I think it's like a bygone era when people had to expose themselves and endanger their own information just to use a service. That had to happen when everything was built on banks, but to the extent that everything's built on crypto, you don't have to do that anymore. So
yeah, totally.
It was actually, I think, like 140 million people. So think about that. That's almost half of the US population. That's insane that they lost that much data. That's very, very bad.
And it actually they're one of many. Yeah.
Like I mean, for a lot of people, I think it's very annoying to hear people saying, "Oh, why do you need security if you're not doing anything bad?" It's like, I don't know, because idiots like Equifax are going to lose all my documentation. So that would be, you know, a really a nice answer to give.
A friend of mine got hacked. Well, his identity got stolen, and he spent I think it was 8 years, basically getting his black spot off of, because these people then took out loans, opened up bank accounts, did all sorts of stuff, never paid it. He then all of a sudden couldn't get mobile phone contracts and anything.
Yeah, it's horrible. So one amazing statistic I learned when I was researching this stuff is that in the US alone, the financial loss to identity theft is something like $30 or $40 billion a year.
Yeah.
Which is a huge number generally, but it's a larger number than the sum of all forms of property theft combined. So like all cars that are stolen, all purses that are stolen, like every robbery of a home, everything that is stolen in a year.
Civil forfeiture? Pretty sure they pick the most for that, and they're still the winners.
Yeah, that's maybe a separate category, because when the government steals things, it's not considered stealing, I guess. But yeah, so identity theft is this massive problem, and you can end it by not requiring people to give up their personal information. So this is like one of the coolest things about crypto. And then these regulators come in and they force people to endanger themselves again. So we refuse. We're not going to comply with that. And so we'll block those states and we'll keep talking about it.
And we were one of the first exchanges also to join that campaign.
That's right. You guys blocked New York. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, all good. And we've also blocked Washington State now, unfortunately, the good people of Washington State. But, it's one of these problems, this identity theft problems, that I think crypto is another thing that will solve it. So instead of going straight to you personal, the flesh and blood you, people will eventually build some sort of identity that may be on a blockchain and then use that around the place to log on. And as that builds up reputation, and if that gets stolen, you can cancel it and generate a new one or something of that sort. But when you're personal, when you're flesh and blood, when your photo, your biometrics get stolen, it's gone forever. It's out there forever. You can never, ever get it back, folks.
It's non-revocable.
It's non-revocable. And it's a real shocker. I mean, my friend, he spent 8 years. He doesn't know if it's going to happen again. It could. It could just happen again because it's out there now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, one of many things that crypto will actually help improve as long as regulators will stay the hell out of the way.
Yeah.
So what are your long-term thoughts on crypto? You know, I think it's really funny going to some of these events lately because now everybody's an expert. They're like, I've been into crypto since early summer 2017. And I'm like, ooh, you know, it's like completely ridiculous.
Yeah. There's always the
and
freshman class.
right. Totally. And they've got their own things that go on. But I mean, what do you think is the direction? There does seem to be like this pressure with China. They're getting all mad. But I think that the innovation is sort of outpacing the attempts at stifling the innovation.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? Like, where do you see crypto going in the future? Do you have any predictions? Any thoughts? Everybody's always wants predictions, I guess.
Your point is spot on that it's expanding so rapidly that like no one can keep up. So even those of us that are like in the industry are just constantly overwhelmed with what's going on. And you think of it from the perspective of like a regulator. Like the SEC was probably just starting to get their minds wrapped around Bitcoin. And then token sales start happening. And like, what the hell is that? Can you imagine like the meetings that they've had at the SEC of like what to do with these crypto tokens? They don't understand the technology. They don't understand what the tokens are for. They don't know who's buying them. They don't know who's selling them. It happens all over the world.
This is pandemonium.
Billions of dollars are getting raised, and they've got to just be going crazy, which brings me a great deal of comfort because I feel like that's a sign that progress is happening. So yeah, it is a spontaneous phenomenon. Like no one is in charge of crypto. It's just a breakthrough in computer science, and all of humanity around the world is now innovating in a million directions on top of it. So yeah, it doesn't stop. And this is great. I mean, it's a great time to be alive and a really fun project to be part of.
Yeah, I find it funny when people say we'll ban something or other like an ICO, and you think, well, you know what you're actually banning there is the sale of software. You know, at the end of the day, like it's kind of
before,
yeah, which they've tried before. I mean, they tried to put the invention of cryptography, back in the bag, and
yeah,
it just didn't work.
Think of like if governments ban email at any point in email's growth, right? Like email and Bitcoin, I think, have a lot of good similarities. They took what was previously an analog process. You know, with email, it replaced putting a physical paper in an envelope and mailing it, which would take 3 days and cost some money, and made that instant and digital. Bitcoin replaced transfers between banks or checks, which are analog and can take days and cost money, and made it instant and digital. And just as it would be absolutely absurd for humanity to prevent itself the benefits that email brought, because terrorists can use email, right? And like, you don't need to be licensed to have an email account. You don't need to be licensed to send an email, and the government agencies don't have to peruse your content and approve it before it can be sent on to the recipient. Everyone just sends email all over the place. Good people, bad people, and on net, I think there's no one that could argue that email has been bad for humanity just because terrorists have been able to use it. Bitcoin has to be considered the same way. It makes something that all humans do vastly faster and more efficient. That increases the wealth and prosperity of all of humanity. And the fact that some bad people will use it too, I think, is pretty irrelevant.
Yeah,
That's well said.
Definitely. And I sent out a tweet the other day, which is sort of similar about, the government should definitely ban Bitcoin because bad people, use Bitcoin. And they should also definitely ban shoes because bad people use shoes to run away from crime scenes.
Yeah.
And it's a very similar thing, right? It's just these ridiculous, and we laugh at the thought of banning email. I mean, it just wouldn't happen. And I hope Bitcoin gets to the point where it just becomes ridiculous to even talk about banning it.
Yeah. So the one difference, though, is when email came along, it didn't threaten any serious entrenched interests, right? Like it threatened the post office, but they're kind of a weak and stupid organization anyway. Cryptocurrency actually threatens the entire banking system, and that is not a weak industry. So I think the fundamental challenge of crypto will be to grow an adoption fast enough and to win over the hearts and minds of the public faster than banks can organize to, and that includes central banks, can organize to try to stop it. And it remains to be seen, like who wins that battle. But I have a feeling that it'll be crypto that wins.
Same.
I believe.
Same.
I think it's impossible for crypto not to win. I mean, the government just sucks at everything. So that's like the thing that actually works for us, is that they're bad and slow. I mean, they're like, they're big and they're sort of like Godzilla. Like they can cause a lot of damage just because they're Godzilla. But at the end of the day, you can outrun Godzilla or trick him.
Yeah,
you know,
they're good at killing people and destroying things. They can do that pretty quickly and efficiently. But something that people use to improve commerce and business and interaction between themselves, they can't stop that, because all people have an intrinsic desire to do things faster and easier and cheaper. Like that's an overwhelming force that can't be overrun. So we'll see. There'll be a lot of battles, and it's not going to be an easy fight. But
yeah, and this is what I talk about a lot as well, is that a lot of these blockchain companies are decentralizing things that don't really need decentralizing. Money really needed decentralizing, because it just got shut down. I mean, private currencies have been tried before, and the state comes in and chops off the head, and all, the heads go rolling, and that's the end of it. But when Satoshi developed the blockchain with proof of work and a token, it really was a way to sidestep that whole process and have something that flourishes. And moving forward, I think a lot of these services that are saying, oh, we'll have dating on the blockchain, it's not banned, it's not, maybe there's some inefficiencies that could get solved, but I generally think it's these grayer markets where there is a market for it and people want it and it's not hurting anyone, and it's big enough so a crowd want it and it gets adopted. And I think Bitcoin is like that.
Money, yeah. Blockchains will change a lot of industries, but none more so than money itself, which it started with Bitcoin. Yeah.
Yeah, here.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. Erik, do you have anything that you want to, like, any sites where you want people to check in with you guys, or any upcoming appearances where people can sort of get the inside scoop on 2018 for ShapeShift?
I would recommend to go to shapeshift.io and just sign up for the newsletter at the bottom. Just enter your email down there and you can be in touch. And if you're curious about Prism, sign up at prism.exchange, and we're letting people in every day to that product. You can follow me on Twitter at Erik Voorhees, ErikVoorhees. And I will see you all around the community.
All right. Sounds good. See you in Aspen next week.
Cheers.
Thanks. All right.
Bye,
so everybody, that was a fun segment. I liked actually being on, because the last time Erik was on, I wasn't available. But before we bring on Kat, which I'm super psyched about because I've wanted to have her on my show since we decided about, by the way, this is our conclusion. Mac and cheese bites are sucky, even though they seem like they should be something that's good. She's on mute right now, but I can see that she's like, yeah, man, fight the power. And it all started with mac and cheese bites. But before we bring on Kat, just really quick, I want to say thank you to our main sponsor, the Bitcoin CPA. Kirk is making my life better every day with an infinite amount of patience for my tax problems. Not tax problems, but just trying to get set up to take payments with Bitcoin is not always the easiest process. So he's been really good with that. Crypto Compare, our friends out in the UK, they have something linked to Vaultoro, right? Yeah,
Crypto Compare is great. You can compare your gold holdings to on Vaultoro with every crypto, and you can compare your crypto with gold. So it's fantastic. And I must say, just back to the Bitcoin CPA as well. You know, I really see Bitcoin as another currency. So people that are living in, for instance, Gibraltar, that's dealing with Spanish, with euros, but also with pounds, and they're constantly having to do taxes with two different currencies. It's very much the same. And there's people specializing in how to deal with the tax implications of dealing with other foreign currencies. And Bitcoin, I see it as a foreign currency. It's the currency of the internet instead of England or of Europe. And yeah, he does a great job. Crypto Compare is fantastic too. Check it out. Do yourself a favor, folks.
Okay. I like your enthusiasm. I also wanted to give a shout out to two of my favorite podcasts, Sovereign Tech and Sex and Science Hour. So yeah, I don't always want to listen to crypto stuff, so I can change it up. And yeah, I went on to
Sovereign Tech is
Brian's.
great.
Well, you know, I've like listened to little segments of Sovereign Tech because Brian's my friend and I like what he does. But then like I started scrolling through some of the titles today and I was like, wow, there's some racy ass titles in here. So now I'm like, oh, maybe I should listen more often.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, good friend of the show. And yeah, I guess we can bring on Kat and then we'll talk about some of our other sponsors toward the end. Kat, nice to see you on the show. Thank you for joining us. Just hit the mute button and we'll be able to hear you.
Hi,
Perfect.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I'm glad we were able to make it.
Yeah, and I'm glad I was able to find someone who agrees that mac and cheese bites are a huge disappointment.
You know, I think it's really important to have standards in the world. And especially like if you're going to eat mac and cheese, it better be worthwhile and delicious. And if it's going to be a dry, crusty cheese thing, then like keep it somewhere else.
Thank you. The point of mac and cheese is cheese.
Yeah, and like gooiness and not grossness. So anyway, aside from that, for our audience back at home, can you give me a little bit of background on all the different amazing things that you've done for Liberty?
Well, that's a tough order. So I'm kind of, I guess, an internet libertarian of sorts. I do stuff in the real world, but you're most likely going to see me online engaging with people. You know, I believe really strongly in bringing the message of liberty to people across social media. But when we met at PorkFest, I was actually there as co-founder of Feminists for Liberty, and we were out there talking about libertarian feminism, did a couple panels there on sex work and what it means to be a woman working in the liberty movement. I'm also on both boards of an organization called Students for Liberty. I'm sorry, I'm not on the board of Students for Liberty. There's just a lot of liberty that I've been saying. Students for Sensible Drug Policy. Not Students for Liberty, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, which is an international nonprofit empowering students around the world to help end the drug war. It's a very grassroots organization, since obviously drug war and drug policy is very different, not just from state to state, but the folks who are in our Nigeria chapters are going to be working on some very different things than the folks who are in Ireland, or the folks here in the US, or the folks in Mexico. They just have
How many chapters do you have? How many locations are represented?
Oh, wow. So I cannot remember off the top of my head, but I think at the last count, we're in 28 different countries now. And
wow.
We are about to turn 18, I think, this next year. So
you beat me to my next question. I was going to say, for how long has it been going on? I have such an interest now in the drug war, thanks to my friendship with Lynn Ulbricht and Ross Ulbricht, right, and Callie, of course. Which is sort of like a sad and unfortunate lesson, but I'm really like looking forward to the Reform Conference, which is supposed to be this gigantic conference down in Atlanta, October, I think 11th through the 14th.
I think so. I'm going to be there. It'll be great. That's the Drug Policy Alliance's conference that they have every other year. It's a biannual conference. I've been going every other year since 2009. And yeah, it's amazing. There's a ton of people, and I hear Lynn's going to be speaking there.
Yeah, I know that she's going to be on a panel. So we're looking forward to that. We're going to go there before we go. We're both going to the Tom Woods cruise down in Florida. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, it should be a ton of fun. Lynn actually spoke at a Students for Sensible Drug Policy conference with me a couple of years ago, and that ended up being a fully packed room. The whole floor was covered with folks, and everyone had their phones out, and we're live streaming it. So it was amazing. It's that, the whole case is just awful. What a waste of human life, really. You give a double life sentence to someone who's done really nothing worth of that. I mean, so he ran a website. That's essentially what the sentence is for. But on the other hand, and of course, it's awful, and you know, it makes me so upset. The one good thing that I think we can pull out of that is that it's brought this message to such a wider audience.
I certainly agree with that. And the story is so startling. I have a friend of mine who just started working with me, and she saw the Deep Web film, and she was just floored. And, you know, I think that it puts a human face that people can maybe relate to. Like, he seems not like some scary drug guy or whatever. He looks like just a boy next door. And I think that's good because it helps people sort of relate to the story in a personal way. And I mean, it's just so wild. It's been a wild ride. And I just heard the other day from Lynn, and I have to double check this with her because it seems so bananas, but the second founder of the Silk Road, like Silk Road 2, he got no jail time except for time served.
What?
I'm actually not sure about that exactly, but I do know that
she just told me that yesterday. So yeah, that's why I was like, is that even possible? Because that's
I know that they were looking at some really short sentences even when I saw that. And of course, like, I'm never going to say that I wish someone, especially someone for a victimless crime, has a longer sentence. You know, none of these people should be in prison, period. But
agreed.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's completely disproportionate what Ross got.
It was a typical sort of just make an example.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, that's a huge part of what's going on with the drug war. We all know that these laws aren't at all being enforced in any sort of any clear way. You know, one person might get nothing, another person gets a double life sentence, right? And it can be for the exact same crime. And this happens constantly. It's an obvious violation of rule of law. Even if you do believe that people should be locked in a cage for doing something that hurts no one, an entirely voluntary action, which, you know, I clearly do not. But even if you do, I think it's really obvious that the way that we enforce these policies, or rather the way that the state enforces these policies, is unfair, and it really sets a weird precedent. And I think that that's one of the things about the Ross's case as well, not just the sentencing disparity, which is a huge part of drug policy, even outside of Ross's case. Just in general, sentencing disparities have been a huge problem within drug policy. I think it also sets an interesting precedent because this is a digital case. And the fact that we're talking about cryptocurrency, that Erik was discussing cryptocurrency right before this, is really interesting because this is this whole new, almost like the Wild West, right? In this very real way. And what Ross's case is really doing is setting precedent for how similar cases will be treated in the future. And it already has. And it's worth mentioning, you know, like the Hydra, if you shut down Silk Road, immediately a bunch of other websites popped up. And not only that, but websites that I think you could have argued were less safe and perhaps even less ethical than Silk Road. Solving any problems. All we're doing is we're really looking at some dangerous precedents being set in terms of how these investigations can go, what can be considered evidence, you know, and when you have situations where you're not even sure who wrote what on what website under what handle, and that's what's being used as evidence, that's, you know, deeply concerning.
Yeah, I would say that it's definitely, I guess, par for the course too, right? I don't know. Very upsetting stuff. I wonder, you know, you've been involved in drug policy stuff, right? It gets a little bit overwhelming for a person that's relatively new to that type of activism because, you know, they just lock away so many people and they throw away the key, and it just seems like there's nothing to be done. A few episodes ago on the show, I had my friend Kingsley Edwards, and his father, Michael Edwards, has been in prison for 25 years for a tablespoon of cocaine. And yeah, we're all out here and we're all outraged, but how do we make sure that Ross's story doesn't turn into that story? How do we prevent more stories like Michael's from cropping up? Like, do you think that there's been some progress? There's obviously some concerns among libertarians with legalization of drugs, because then you're basically inviting the government into yet another aspect of our lives. But like, is there a reason for hope when it comes to this stuff? And what do you think is what do you think are some challenges and some progress that you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, you know, I'm sympathetic to those arguments that people make in terms of, yes, are we opening a gateway for government to get more involved when we legalize drugs, when we create these legal pathways? Wouldn't we rather be operating in a black market? And I understand where those are coming from, but I do think that it's very misguided. Because I think that fundamentally there's no way that you can say the difference of, oh yes, now the government says that they have a right to regulate my business is the same level of harm caused by the state as, oh, well, this is illegal, which means that the government can do a no-knock raid, slam down my door at 3 a.m, shoot my dogs, and drag me out of the house and possibly kill my family members in the process, right? You know, when you're looking at cases with things like a baby being permanently disfigured because a smoke grenade from a no-knock raid that went off at the wrong house, the smoke grenade gets thrown into its crib and its face gets blown off. Like, I simply don't think that we can justify saying that an illegal market is the best way to do it, or a black market is the best way to do it. Proposition 19 campaign in California, which was the 2000 campaign to legalize and regulate cannabis. And that was actually the very first tax that the Libertarian Party had ever endorsed. And it's simply that. It's a matter of, yes, obviously taxation is theft. It's claiming someone's labor, it's claiming someone's life, their body, but not as tangibly as actually having the drug trade, which is, of course, a voluntary trade that very clearly is much safer for consumers, for people involved in the trade, for people around that, for literally everyone in society when it's legal. I think that we've had a lot of successes come in the last several years. You know, we now have more than half of US states have some sort of legal marijuana regimen. So that's certainly something that we can say is a win. I think that there's been a lot of wins in terms of naloxone access, which is a drug that you can use to help reverse the effects of opioid overdose. There's been similar positive wins for other types of cannabinoid drugs. So that's all very positive. On the negative side, I'm a little bit worried with what we've seen, both in terms of increased regulations on things like e-cigarettes, vapes. That's certainly a concern. Increased regulations around tobacco, where people could say like, oh, well, we're just regulating it. Of course, when we move forward, that's how we get cases like Eric Garner. You know, he was choked out on the street because he was selling Lucy cigarettes. That's huge.
You know, I just read, not to interrupt, but the guy who videotaped him is serving over a year in jail right now for videotaping him.
Right, yeah, for interfering in a police investigation. Yeah, completely unbelievable.
But see, that's the fact that happens scares the hell out of me. Like, I think that makes me like so nervous and scared and awful, because it's really people's lives beyond just these fines and like, okay, now I can smoke weed in the street. You know what I mean?
Right, absolutely. We're talking about people's lives. We're not talking about, oh, can you smoke weed in the street? Or even more, you know, your average person who's smoking marijuana, they have a very minuscule risk of ever being caught. They're smoking it at home. They're probably, a lot of them live in neighborhoods where they're unlikely to be heavily policed. But that's not at the end game. That's not really what we're talking about. And, you know, with the opioid scare, we're seeing more and more overdoses from opioids, and that's directly connected to prohibition, both in terms of this kind of like pill mill scare where doctors are being threatened and told, don't prescribe these opioids even to patients who really need them. But doctors are worried they're going to lose their license, they're going to be investigated, so they don't give it to them. They have to go onto the black markets. and other similar.
I didn't know that was even going on. Wow.
Where more and more people are going onto the black market for these drugs. The black market is getting much more dangerous. Even as you try to restrict the supply, what's ending up happening is that more dangerous amalgams are getting on the market. That's causing more overdoses. And then the response again and again is what we need is more prohibition. Yeah, so that's obviously, it's a huge problem, and it is worrisome. I do think that overall, in terms of the drug war, we are getting more free, but there's a lot of things still to worry about.
I think one of the great things, sorry, Tatiana,
no, go ahead, Josh.
One of the things about being illegal is that there's no arbitration for disputes. And so the drug trade or black markets in general deal with disputes, with violence. And this is one thing that Ross and the Silk Road and these sort of sites really helped in black markets or in dark markets where there's no arbitration, is to enable a digital arbitration service for disputes. And it was the first time with these online marketplaces where someone could say, hey, I tested this and it's half of it is powdered soap and not actual opiates or whatever it is.
Right.
And making it dangerous. And it was the first time you could actually whinge and complain to a drug dealer. Imagine doing that on the street. Mother, it's just not going to happen. So, what was solved by the Silk Road and all these things was actually the safety of people. Yeah,
exactly. It keeps people safer, both in terms of knowing, or at least having a better idea of knowing what they're purchasing. I mean, there's a reason that when you go on Amazon, you're more likely to buy something that has 200 reviews than something that has no reviews, right?
Exactly.
So certainly you have that. And then it also kept people safer in terms of, well, you're buying and selling it through the computer. You don't need to have violence. You don't even necessarily need to know actual physical locations of people. You're not doing that hard trade. You don't need to have a situation where there's someone with a briefcase and someone with a gun, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's really, going back to your argument before about, we should just keep it in the black markets. It's not about that. It's about the people's lives. They're just being thrown in prison. And I think America, you poor guys over in America, are really suffering with a government that just is so happy to throw people under the bus. It's almost, you hear these stories of, Chappelle Corby was a young woman who went to Bali and had some marijuana in a boogie bag. She ended up getting busted. All the cameras were dodgy, nothing worked. And the judge that she got was a judge and his claim to fame was that he's never found anyone not guilty in 20 years.
What? That's a horrible qualification.
Right, that's not justice, is it? And no, see, that's the same thing. We've seen right here, I live in Washington, D.C., just north of us is Baltimore. Baltimore has certainly seen a lot of problems with the police misconduct over the years. Most recently, they had a situation where the police got caught on camera because they have their body cameras and they didn't realize that the body cameras were programmed. They hadn't been told by the manufacturers that the body cameras were actually live recording the whole time and only saved the footage from 30 seconds before when they turned it on. So they were caught on camera, a whole group of policemen planting drugs as evidence, then turning on their camera to arrest someone.
Wow.
Which, of course, when you go back and look and you're saying, okay, so now are we going to turn back and say that all of the people who've been arrested by this police department need to be reinvestigated? And unfortunately, I don't think that's but
yeah,
it seems like what should happen.
Right. And, and there's an incentive there, unfortunately, for people to keep getting arrested. And it's really upsetting.
Yeah, guys, I think body cams are one of the best things, or taser cams are actually one of the best things to stop, to keep police in check. I mean, it means, especially live streaming body cams are just so important in this day and age. When you give a small group of people so much power, you have to have it in check. And they're just such a great way to keep it in check.
I agree. Although I think that there can also be other concerns there as well. of course, like the camera can capture a much larger vision than the eyes can, which means that they could go back and look at footage and catch other so-called crimes or actual crimes. Putting my libertarian hat on there, and of course, like other things. I think it's important, of course, cameras are good, they're helpful. We need to be careful about how they're used. And I think that we also need to make sure that we are still empowering citizens to be able to record police encounters on the streets with their phones.
For sure.
Or other things like that, right? We really need that independent third-party evidence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I love all this. I want to switch gears a little bit because I want to make sure that we get to the ladies of liberty-ishness of you. So you are the founder of Feminists for Liberty.
I'm a co-founder, yes.
Co-founder of Feminists for Liberty. And so what I love about the libertarian movement, there's a lot of different things that I do and some things that I don't. So when I talk about the men in the libertarian movement, I say the odds are good, but the goods are odd. And there's some really great guys in there, but there's a lot of knuckleheads. I find,
and I think that's true of every.
I love it.
That's also true. But uniformly, I find the women in liberty to just excel and just be so wonderful. And I think it's kind of sad when feminism gets lost in the chatter because it's getting this bad rap because of these wackadoo feminists, because there's a real place for the feminist libertarian voice. So I love what you're doing around that. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about how you kind of came to find that right balance and like what your experiences have been like there?
Yeah, definitely. So people ask me all the time, or they'll straight out tell me like, you can't be a feminist and a libertarian, and think they're completely wrong. And you're right. A big part of that is that both in the media and popular culture, there's been this sort of misunderstanding of what it means to be a feminist, what it means to be a libertarian. And what that also often comes out as is that these kind of very statist left-wing feminists who push government solutions to problems are seen as the only types of feminists that there are. And alternately, there's unfortunately a small strain of the libertarian movement that feels that discussing non-state solutions to things such as gender discrimination, racial discrimination, etc., is an attack on liberty, which of course it isn't. So where I'm coming from is that fundamentally, and sorry, I've lost my earpiece. Fundamentally, both libertarianism and feminism come from a respect for individuals and choice. Both libertarianism and feminism are about an individual being able to choose their own life path, separate from this kind of collectivist idea of who they must be and what they must do. So that's very much how I come to it. There's no sacrifice for me. It's not as if it's because I'm a libertarian, I have to be less of a feminist, or because I'm a feminist, I have to be less of a libertarian. And if we look at history, the number one oppressor of women, and of course, because feminism does impact people of all genders, the number one oppressor of people in general is the state. And a lot of what we look at, a lot of the ways in which people have been forced to live in specific gender roles, had specific laws pushed upon them. That's all the state. That's not individuals. There's no reason to think that the state is going to be some great savior now when it never has been previously. Yeah,
I think a lot of the flack towards feminism has come from the fact that a lot of the time, a lot of feminists aim towards the state to beg for harsher laws defining the right to be free, which is kind of an odd thing to ask for, when really, I totally see where you're coming from. I mean, for me, the word feminism means, hey, a woman, a man should have the same right to choose what the heck they want to do with their life, and that's about it, really. I mean, it doesn't really boil down to much more than that. And to say that, and that is to me the ultimate of libertarian philosophy anyway.
Absolutely.
Is, hey, just leave me the heck alone. If I want to write a book as a female, that was unheard of 100 years ago, that a woman would actually put her own name on a book. You'd have to have a ghostwriter's name as a man. I mean, it's absurd. And really, it's about you want to be, and whether you're a man or a woman, it doesn't matter.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it's not even 100 years ago. I mean, less than 50 years ago, women didn't have full rights. A married woman couldn't own property in the same way, couldn't go to court. You know, we didn't recognize marital rape. We didn't have an idea of women own their own bodies and are not the property of their husbands up until 1993. Yeah, so obviously, and that's all the state. That's the state's doing. That's not individuals.
I have recently, I don't really pay attention so much to the men's rights movement, although like here and there I'll hear things and I'll say, oh, that seems reasonable. So I saw that movie, the Red Pill film. I don't know if you've seen it. I think that's what it's called, the Red Pill. And this girl, Cassie, she made it. And what was, I thought really valuable about the film was seeing from the men's perspective. I thought that was really good, but also seeing that all of the problems that both men and women are facing in this like supposed battle between men and women are literally there because of government. Like if you took government out of it, you would have so many fewer problems in the whole infrastructure.
Absolutely.
They're like ruining it for everybody. So I mean,
absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of it.
You know,
and there's I do think I wouldn't consider myself a men's rights activist because I think that that's kind of a loaded term, but I do think that there are a lot of ways in which men get the short end of the stick. And you're right, a lot of that comes from the state. And a lot of that comes from this idea that we need to set men and women up as some sort of like warring camps to fight each other. And fundamentally, and I know that people misunderstand when feminists start talking about patriarchy, and they think that that means like, oh, men are these evil creatures that are just, they want to ruin women's lives and everything's bad. But a lot of the ways in which men are discriminated against in society also comes from the patriarchy. It has these ideas of these kind of very collectivizing ideas of men have to be this way, women have to be this way, and we will enforce that using the state or using other types of coercive force. And yeah, absolutely. I don't think that feminism can possibly, you know, achieve any of its goals without also addressing all the ways in which men and people of all genders really are discriminated against and are not treated the same legally or otherwise, and are not given the chance to kind of make those decisions for themselves as an individual on how they want to live.
Do you, I mean, I find your viewpoint refreshing, and obviously I support it. Do you think that with all the, I'm concerned about the yammering, right? The media is just like, oh, we have this issue and this issue. Like, it seems like it takes away the legitimate points of what feminism sets out to sort of like rectify. Do you think that in your experience, have people just kind of gone off the leftist deep end, and like that's like, or do you think that some more reasoned approach to what is feminism is kind of coming forward right now? Like, do you think that people are getting a more moderate viewpoint, or do you think that we're going to see a continuous slide into, you know, wildness?
I do think that the media has a tendency to pick kind of these stereotypes to fill certain roles when they need to pick sound bites. And that is part of the reason that we founded Feminists for Liberty, because we did want to have representatives who can say, look, we can talk about libertarianism and feminism from one whole perspective. Feminism doesn't mean that you're a socialist or you're a communist or anything like that. And equally, being a libertarian doesn't mean that you're some sort of like woman-hating white male that they like to make it out to be. And I think it's no different than the actually like disingenuous few journalists out there who still, and I don't think this is the case so much anymore, but there are some who will still conflate libertarianism, for instance, with like white nationalism, where it's like, no, clearly you and I, all of us know that the vast majority of libertarians are not like this. And of course, anybody who wants to enforce state solutions for their ideas is not a libertarian, right? so I do think that's changing. I also think that with the advent of the internet, there's a lot more ability for people to get together and discuss these ideas. Social media bubbles aside, I think that there certainly is. So that allows a wider spectrum of beliefs. And as you and I both know from a lot of the libertarian women and men and everyone else that we know, there are a lot of great libertarian feminists out there. And I do think, you know, as we're bringing that message out there, as we're talking about these issues more and more, I think that there are a lot of people who are being attracted to these ideas.
I like it. I think so. I think it's hard when you've got the Facebook bubble, because Facebook sort of feeds you weird manipulated info, which creeps me out. So it doesn't like, it makes you think that you're getting a level playing field, but it's totally,
but you're not.
Yeah, not at all.
It's all algorithms built, and you know, I do digital for my career, and like it's a whole game. It's all algorithms, and the entire thing is set up to try and make sure that you spend as much time as possible on Facebook without leaving.
I hate them. I really do. I want bad things for the future of Facebook. I'm sorry, Zuckerberg, but it's time to go. It's also the end of the show, but Kat, where can people catch up with you? Like, what's the process to join Feminists for Liberty? Do you do something? And like, what about students that maybe want to get involved and get some sensible drug policy going?
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as I go, I'm on Twitter all the time. And
you're the best Twitterer. I told somebody that today. I said, oh, get her tweets. She's always got something good on there. It's true.
Thank you.
Some gold up there.
I love Twitter. It's great. You get to hear so many different viewpoints, including ones that you find completely abhorrent, or ones that you're like, oh, that's really weird. But you get this like wide thing. You can engage with some of the most important people, and some people out there who have like 5 followers but might still have something kind of interesting that they're saying, you know. So I love Twitter. I'm on there. I'm at Kat Murti, KATMURTI. So you can find me there. You can find Feminists for Liberty at Feminist Liberty, where you can find me and Feminists for Liberty on Facebook. SSDP, the same thing. We're at SSDP, and just tweet to me, and
what's
I will
SSDP?
tell you how to get involved. Students for Sensible Drug Policy.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're at SSDP. We're on Facebook. We have an awesome outreach coordinator team that can help students around the world figure out how to get set up, or hook them up with activists in their area, help them really like get that anti-drug war activism going. So.
Oh, I love it. That's
the best guests. Don't we have the best guests?
We do.
Yeah, hell yeah. And I learned so much about cryptocurrency right before this too.
Oh, good. Yeah, I think this was a fun show. So I'm really glad that you could make it, and I look forward to hanging out in Atlanta in just a few weeks. Me and Lynn will both be down there, so we're looking forward to hanging out with you. We always say Kat's so cool.
Hell
so
yes, I love you both.
Yeah,
now,
very good.
The other people I love, the viewers of our show. We get so many nice comments, and the show is just beautiful. And if you'd like to give us a thumbs up and share this video,
definitely will.
It helps us out. And yeah, I like
that Josh thinks of these things. I'm in marketing and I don't promote my own show. Josh is like, yeah, you want to maybe tell people to subscribe? I'm like, oh, I don't know. They don't.
I do it very sporadically.
All right. Well, great. Thanks everybody for checking in. Make sure go check out Volturo. They're doing all this new stuff over there. CryptoMediaUp.com is my company, and check out my new album at TatianaMoroz.com. Keep the faith. I don't know, Kat. I think I gave you a copy, didn't I? I'll have to bring you one.
Not yet. You bring me one in Atlanta.
I like it. All right. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. We appreciate it, and we'll see you. I don't know if we have a show next week, but just stay tuned and we'll keep you all posted.
Awesome.
Thanks everyone.